Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to welcome you to today's Microsoft TechNet webcast, where we'll be covering Microsoft Business Intelligence using the Kimball method. Now, today's presenter is Warren Thornthwaite, who is with the Kimball Group. Without further delay, Warren, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. I'm Warren Thornthwaite, as Ryan said, and we also have with us Joy Mundy, who will be fielding some of the questions so that I don't get a little too distracted. I briefly want to introduce myself and the Kimball Group. For those of you who are not familiar with us, we are a consulting organization of basically folks who've been involved in data warehousing and business intelligence for way too long. We've been doing this, well, Margie Ross, Ralph Kimball and I worked together at Metaphor back in 1984. So it's really been, over 20 years. I think one of the important things about the Kimball Group for folks to understand is that there are actually only 6 of us. We're not sort of a body shop, if you will. We're really primarily interested in helping people figure out how to be successful in data warehousing and business intelligence. And we've worked pretty hard to capture the techniques and methods and approaches that we've found to be successful over the years and put those into articles and tips and books that will be useful to hopefully to folks like you all who are working on data warehousing and business intelligence systems. We have a couple of books that we've put together, and I'm going to come to the next slide. Joy and I worked on the Microsoft Data Warehouse Toolkit, which is the latest book in the Kimball Group Toolkit series. And it takes a lot of the principles and techniques that we've described over the years and translates them down to the Microsoft platform, specifically to SQL Server 2005. And it's a real departure for us, and we're actually really pretty excited about it because we feel that the market in general and Microsoft in particular has really reached the point where a sort of single source provider is really a viable possibility, and I think SQL Server 2005 really proves that. And we'll talk about that as we go through the presentation. I'd also like to get a little bit of background from folks in the audience. If you haven't worked with this kind of poll before with live meeting, just click on whatever description for the primary role that you have. One of the weaknesses of live meeting is that you can only choose one. So I did put in one that's all of the above. So take a few minutes or a few seconds and just click in. It's interesting. Let's see, we can make the results available so people can see them as they're coming in. This is real interesting to me. It's actually a very fairly broad distribution with several folks in ETL and about an equivalent amount in sort of the BI application report development, the front end. And I think one of the interesting things to look at is the all of the above is by far the leader, about 27, 28%. So that tells you something, I think, about these kinds of projects. They are often, especially as we move forward, there are multiple roles we play, and in some cases, we end up playing them all. So I'm going to move on to the next poll and get a sense for the kinds of projects that you folks are working on. So hopefully these are terms that make sense. Yeah, they seem to. Oh, that's great. So the departmental data mart is sort of an obvious concept. The package data warehouse is something that may come from your ERP vendor, for example. Projects where we're working to integrating multiple existing data marts, first generation enterprise-wide DWBI system. That's great. This is a good mix, you guys. I'm really happy to get this kind of information. In particular, those of you who work on the first generation and even in the departmental data marts, I think a lot of what we're going to talk about will be sort of directly applicable to your situation. So All right, that's good. I'm going to press on because we have a lot of material to cover. So what are we going to cover? I'm going to briefly start out talking about the right reason, and you see I spell right here with a capital R. And I think that the reason or the attitude or the sort of purpose you see for yourself and for your team is really important to determining your long-term success in building a data warehouse and business intelligence system. So I just want to talk briefly about that. Most of the time we'll spend covering the Kimball method and the lifecycle approach. And then we're going to tie those together back with SQL Server 2005 and to see how the Kimball method and sort of the Microsoft product line align with each other. And we'll end up with a summary and a little Q&A session at the end. So let's dive in. There's not, by the way, just so folks know, we don't have a lot of technical information in this presentation. A lot of what we're going to talk about is business-oriented and process-oriented. It's often it's not the most fun part of the process for technical folks, but in many ways it's the most important. So it's necessary, and hopefully people will not be disappointed by the focus. But the business part we really feel is the most important part. So let's talk about the right reason. The right reason, this is not a poll, by the way, if you're looking for your opportunity to provide input. There are lots of different reasons that we run across for building a data warehouse and business intelligence system. Certainly, the CIO told us is one we hear quite a bit. It sounds like fun. It's a great opportunity for us to add significant value to the business. Something we're hearing a lot lately is we're not building a data warehouse business intelligence system. We're really building an executive dashboard. That's a dangerous thing, and we'll talk about why in a few minutes. But out of these, there is definitely something we'd consider to be a right answer, and that, of course, is answer C. It is, in fact, a great opportunity to add business value. And if you really come at the project with this orientation of we're here to add value, we're here to help the business, it sort of changes your thinking in a way that really sort of works to ensure your success. So adding business value sort of is the primary focus. It's also, by the way, it's a great opportunity to work with senior management and in some ways advance your career and potentially play with fun new technology. So there are lots of good things, lots of good reasons to take on a DWBI system. There are, however, a few risks, right? These systems are definitely high profile. They're used by senior management to make major decisions, and therefore they're quite visible. So that if we succeed, or in the opposite case, if we fail, it's a highly visible failure, and that can be damaging to sort of a career-limiting move, if you will. They are business-driven, and this can be a hard thing for technologists, as I said. Often we tend towards the we tend to move away from business because business is a fuzzy science at best, and we're used to the digital world where everything works or doesn't. It's a 0 or a 1, right? It's the answer is clear, and it runs or it doesn't, and if it doesn't, we can fix it. This really is not the case when we deal with business, when we deal with other people, when we deal with interpersonal communications, with those kinds of softer skills. So the fact that it is business-driven can be a challenge. We tend to, as technologists, we tend to often move into a data warehouse business intelligence system with a technology focus. And we've definitely found over the years this idea of let's build something and then the users will take advantage of it just rarely works. It's like throwing darts with a blindfold. You may hit the target, but you probably won't, and most likely you're going to hit something else like your own foot, and it will cause a certain amount of pain. So the technology focus doesn't work. And I mentioned dashboards before. Dashboards lately have become a real hot sort of topic. They're extremely attractive to senior management. They sound like a great thing. They look good, but they're not a good thing as a starting point because a dashboard, if you think about it, typically includes performance metrics for the entire organization. And this is a problem because it implies that you have data to feed performance metrics for the entire organization. In other words, that you already have a mature data warehousing business intelligence system in place. If you don't have that and you're starting with dashboards, you're going to be doing a whole lot of handwork every night. And it's not a good place to start, although it does have its sex appeal, if you will. There are other risks with DWBI systems. Data quality and data integration are hard problems, even with good technology. Often this is what trips up a project, and it's something you really need to research early on and set expectations about. And in general, the project is just complex, and it's politically charged. We are often making information available that was never available before, and it can be something that is threatening to people in the organization. And we're basically doing what we'd call organizational change. And it's really a good idea to follow someone else's footsteps and make sure that you do as much as you can to mitigate these risks. So what can you do? What is a proven approach? Certainly, there are a couple of approaches out there. I think the Kimball method and the lifecycle approach is the leading approach in the marketplace today. I was just looking yesterday at Amazon, and they have a data warehouse list. The top books in data warehousing. And 4 of the 5 top books on the data warehouse list are the Kimball toolkit books. So if that's any indicator, I think that the approach we're going to describe is certainly one of the more popular approaches, and I think for good reason. So let's run through it. The basic principles of the Kimball method are, as I said, it's business-driven. It follows a life cycle. In other words, we have a series of steps and dependencies in a flow, and that life cycle is an iterative process. It takes an incremental approach in terms of implementation. We pick a small piece, put that in place, make it available to users, and provide business value. Then we go back and get another piece. And we do that in the context of an enterprise data framework. We'll create something we call a bus matrix. We'll use a concept called conform dimensions, and we'll talk about both of these coming up. We deliver the data in what we call a dimensional model. It's a data modeling technique that we've found to be most effective for delivering data to end users, and it ties in very nicely with analysis services. So we'll talk about that. And I think finally, one of the basic principles of the Kimball method is that our job is to provide a full solution to the business users, from the extracts at one end all the way out to delivering applications and business value to the users at the other end. And that's a really important sort of basic principle, because there are many teams that we've run into that sort of view their job as ending before the data actually gets to the users. So the BI part is an integral part of the solution, and it's sort of built into our assumptions. So let's dive into the life cycle itself. The life cycle has basically, we've broken it down into these boxes, and these I guess sort of yellowish boxes up at the beginning are really primarily focused on design. And you'll notice this box here, the largest box on the whole life cycle, is about business requirements. And we sort of make it that way for a couple of reasons. One, we really want to emphasize that You need to have a good sense for business requirements before you can start down the different tracks that follow it, the implementation tracks, if you will. So we do business requirements before we start doing the technical architecture, before we start doing the data track, beginning with dimensional modeling, and before we start doing the applications track. There's a couple of subtle things in this particular drawing. One is that right here at the beginning, there's a little teeny arrow between project planning and business requirements, and it goes both ways. And that's because once we do business requirements, we often end up going back and adjusting the scope of the project. So there's actually a two-way arrow there. The other piece is down at the other end. When we finish a path through the life cycle, we need to maintain that particular path. We also need to loop back and add the next iteration, the next sort of data set, if you will, by moving back and going through the entire life cycle again with another sort of component of the information that we're going to provide, another piece of the information infrastructure. So this graphic is going to be our roadmap for the next 15 slides or so, and we're going to go into detail on the major pieces of it. Now, when I say detail, that's sort of it's a relative term, because what we're doing here in an hour usually takes us 4 days in the lifecycle class. So we're not going to cover everything. In other words, when we're finished, don't think that you're a lifecycle expert quite yet. So let's look at the business requirements. The basic way we typically gather business requirements is to talk to people. We go out and we talk to key folks across the organization, both business people and systems people. In particular, on the systems side, we want to talk to the source systems people. We need to do those two together so that we have a sense for what the business people want, what information they need to support their jobs. And we have a sense for whether or not that information is actually available and what form it's in and what level of quality and things like that. When we talk to the business people, we're asking people to tell us what they do. We're not asking them to tell us what they want. In other words, don't if you ask people what they want, they're really not going to have an answer for you that's a reasonable answer. And we see this happen all the time. The DWBI team goes out and says, "Oh, tell us what you need. Tell us what you want." People are sort of like, "Well, I don't really know. I mean, I want information." The best example of this that we've seen is when you go out with a list of fields from the source system and ask the question, "Well, which ones of these which fields do you want in the database?" And there's only one answer to that question, right? I mean, if you think about it, the answer is all of them. These are not stupid people, right? They don't want to limit themselves in terms of what information they get. So the only answer, certainly the only answer I'd give would be, I want them all. And the fundamental problem with asking people what they want is that we're really asking them to design the system. What we need to do is ask people about their jobs. What are their responsibilities? How do they pursue those responsibilities? What information do they need to inform themselves to make decisions about those responsibilities? Then we take that back and we design a system to help them do their jobs. And this is a fundamental sort of conceptual approach that I think is really important. As we're asking people these questions, we're looking for common, what we call analytic themes. Common ways that people want to look at the information in the organization. There's a couple examples here. The idea of better promotion response rate. So somebody who's responsible for promotions might say, if I could improve the response rate by 2% or 1% or some small amount, it would make a huge difference to the organization. Or somebody else, maybe in the sales organization, might say, if I can improve the performance of our sales team, if I can give them information about our customers and about purchase behaviors and things like that, they can influence the sales process better, and sort of improve sales overall. Now, once we have some of these themes, we need to break them down into the underlying business processes that generate the data needed to support those themes. So if we think about promotion, so if the question is understanding promotions and improving promotion response rate, promotions gets data from several systems, at least something like a promotion system, a customer relationship management system, something that keeps track of the promotions that we create and send out to our potential customers and potentially to our existing customers. There's another system, typically, or another part of the system that tracks responses, who responded to what offer, when did they respond, what was the nature of the response, things like that. And the response may be that they called up or they sent a letter, but they may not end up placing an order, right? So the third and sort of final and most interesting measure of the effectiveness of a promotion is whether or not the customer actually bought something. And so in a case like better promotion rate, we actually need, to really understand that, we need information from 3 different sources. Now, in a case like improved sales performance, we may only need information from the order system. So orders may actually have an impact on both, or may provide information to help us understand both sales performance and promotion response rates. So I'm going to, as we sort of gather this information, I'm going to be keeping track at this lowest level, this business process level, of what information people need in order to address the analytic themes they're interested in. Okay, that was a lot in one slide. Hopefully everyone's still with me. So let's look at what we do with, what else we do as part of the business requirements piece. One of the things we do is create what we call an enterprise bus matrix. And that basically takes all of those business processes, those sort of data sources that we just talked about, and it breaks them out according to the objects that participate in those business processes. And we'll take a look at a bus matrix coming up. We also, one of the most important things that comes out of the requirements is this prioritization process, where we go through the themes and we work with senior management to prioritize them. So we'll look at that process as well. Excuse me. We take all of this, of course, and summarize it in a requirements document. And one of the side benefits that we get out of this business requirements process is we can use it to identify and recruit good business sponsors. And business sponsorship is really a key part to our overall success. We want someone from the business side, or people from the business side, who are what we would consider to be visionary. In other words, they get it. They get the power of information. They understand how it's going to help them do better, and they're excited about it. We also want our sponsors, of course, to be influential. We want them to be tied into the organization, to be able to obtain resources, to be able to change priorities, to be able to help us with that organizational change problem that we need to deal with. At the same time, we want them to be reasonable. So maybe I'm asking too much here, but we want them to understand that what we're doing is a non-trivial thing and that it will take some amount of time and energy to do. This is not a 90-day process, despite what most of the vendors in our community tend to want you to believe. Right? It's a significant investment in time and energy, and we want them to understand that. So let's look at, I'm just curious to take a quick poll to see where, what kind of sponsorship you all have in the organization. Sort of where are, now this is interesting. The CEO, that's interesting. So it's too bad again. So this is really about your primary sponsorship. I'm sure in many cases people have more than one, but sort of who do you view as sort of the most important contributor to your to the project. Now let's show these results so people can see them. So if we look at the top two really are technical folks, right? So we have 44%, 43%, 42, some number in the 40s that are technical in nature, and for those folks in that category, I would encourage you. While it's really valuable to have technical sponsorship in order to get technical resources, it's more important in the long run to have business sponsorship. So I would encourage you to use this business requirements definition process to identify some folks on the business side to to include them as sponsorship. And one quick aside to the folks who have the CFO as your sponsor. It's a good thing, but it can also be a bad thing. In my experience, the CFO can be pretty focused on financial data. And financial data is interesting for measuring sort of financial statistics, if you will. It's not always the most important data from a business value perspective. So let's talk about how we would move senior management towards focusing on business value. The primary way we do this is once we complete the requirements gathering process, we sit down with senior management in a meeting. We run through, basically we do a presentation of the requirements document and run through it from start to finish, discussing the various analytic themes and the data sources that feed those themes. We then work with senior management to prioritize those. So on this matrix, this grid, we have on one axis we have business value from low to high, and on the other axis we have what we call feasibility from low to high. So high feasibility means it's really easy. And we take basically the business processes, the data sources that we've identified, and we work with senior management to put these up on this grid. And senior management basically provides the business value piece, and we help them understand the feasibility piece. In other words, we can say it's going to be easy to do the orders because we know that system. It's been, we've used it before, we've extracted from it before. We have confidence in its data quality. We understand its structures and so on. So orders goes over on the right in terms of its feasibility. It's a highly feasible source. Now orders, in this case, goes on the top in terms of its business value because it feeds many different analytic themes. So it's useful across the organization. And this is often the case that orders actually ends up being orders or sales or the measurement of business. Of our ongoing business activity ends up being one of the key starting points. So we would prioritize this with business folks. They get to understand the level of effort involved, and we educate them in this process. We set expectations in this process. We get to understand the business value. We come out of this meeting with consensus about where we're going to start. And we're going to start in this upper corner, and we're going to move out this way. So we might, in this case, we might do orders first, then orders forecasting, then promotions data, then shipping, and we'll make this list as part of this meeting. One thing I want to point out here that often happens in the absence of business value is a technical, the data warehouse business intelligence team might start with something like exchange rates down here. And they do this because it's relatively easy. In fact, it's the easiest source to work with, and it's relatively low profile. In other words, not a lot of people care about it. So if we fail, we won't get in trouble. The problem is, if we succeed, nobody cares. So we'll work a period of time to get this implemented, and at the end of it, there's no real business value out of it. So we really want to start up here. right? We really want to pick a place like orders that's going to have broad impact across the organization. It's relatively easy to do and has a narrow scope in that sense. So this is out of most of the techniques we'll describe, this is such a relatively easy one, and it has such a huge impact that it's a mandatory technique. We really encourage you or insist that you go through the prioritization process with senior management. So much value comes out of this. One of the other tools that we get out of the requirements process is this enterprise bus matrix. And as I said, it has down the side here, it has the business processes, so orders, and in this case, this, by the way, comes from the AdventureWorks example that ships with SQL Server 2005. So orders, there are actually two kinds of orders in AdventureWorks. There are reseller orders and internet orders, and you can see that they both have a top priority. Across the top, we have what we call dimensions, and dimensions are essentially, you could think of them as objects. These are the objects that participate in the various business processes we have. So reseller orders has an employee that participates in reseller orders. That's the sales rep, right? Obviously, there's a reseller that participates in reseller orders. Internet orders are consumer-based. There's no reseller that participates in them. There is, however, an end customer. So this matrix tells us which dimensions participate in which business processes. That's what the X indicates. Now, where there are multiple X's for a given dimension, like end customer, it means that that dimension participates in multiple business processes. And in that case, we have to make sure that the contents of that dimension are designed in such a way that they apply across all business processes, and we have a term for that we call conformed. So these are conformed dimensions. Conformed dimensions are the fundamental design technique for creating an enterprise information resource. If we don't have conformed dimensions, we can't compare information across business processes. So that's the root of the sort of enterprise design. Let's zip through the rest of the tracks here. Once we get the business requirements in place, we can break off into three tracks that are primarily implementation oriented. The technology track is where we focus on the architecture for the data warehouse. And this is a simple architecture, typical architecture slide where the data moves through an ETL kind of phase, an extract, transformation, and load phase. We have a set of business rules and extract rules that pull the data from various sources. We do data quality kinds of cleansing. We do what we call dimensionalization, where we do that conform dimension. We may integrate data from multiple sources and so on. Once we get it in its proper form, we move it out into the presentation servers layer. And we have two platforms typically in this layer, dimensional-based relational database and a dimensional-based OLAP database. And of course, in SQL Server, the OLAP database is analysis services, and the relational database is the relational engine. Both of these are valuable, and I'll talk about this in the next slide, as part of the presentation layer. And both of them we want to make available to users for different purposes. The presentation layer, the business intelligence layer, if you will, includes ad hoc queries, standard reports, or BI applications we call them, and analytical applications which are more advanced, typically, including some data mining capabilities. We make these available through a BI portal of some sort and provide them out to the business users. All of this is, of course, informed by a metadata layer that helps us define and describe the contents of the BI, the data warehouse business intelligence system. Let's just, while we're here, let's overlay the Microsoft components. Primarily, these in the sort of golden box we'll see come from the SQL Server 2005 tool set. So integration service, SQL Server Integration Services provides the ETL capabilities. The relational database and analysis services, the Cube engine, provide the presentation server layer. Reporting services, data mining, and Visual Studio, some Visual Studio capabilities provide particularly for the standard reports and the analytical applications. Report Builder is a component of reporting services that does provide some ad hoc capabilities. Microsoft also recently bought ProClarity, which can provide strong ad hoc capabilities. Certainly SharePoint can provide BI portal capabilities, and Office 2007 in particular, Office 2007 has added quite a few sort of front-end interactive kinds of capabilities I think will be real important for the Microsoft technology stack for data warehousing and business intelligence. So that's sort of the architecture. I do want to say that the presentation servers layer it includes both relational OLAP engines, and this is new thinking for some people. Some people think of the OLAP layer as part of the business intelligence piece, part of what gets delivered to the users. Really, it's especially with SQL Server 2005, it has great strengths to add across the organization, across the enterprise, especially in terms of ad hoc performance and the analytic language capabilities of MDX. So it's definitely a key component of the presentation server layer. Really, it's good to think of it as a performance tool, like an index tool. It should be part of the infrastructure, if you will. So let's just quickly, I just want to give you our sense for the Microsoft platform. I think the integration services is certainly a competitive ETL tool. It's really designed for performance. It's primarily memory-based, which will lead you towards 64-bit computers, certainly. The relational database is a strong business intelligence platform. With SQL Server 2005, it has a lot of key BI-related features. Real partitioning, I think, is a good example of that. Analysis services has made some major improvements that really line up well, I think, with the Kimball method. The dimensional design is fundamentally different. It really is dimensional from the ground up now. The model is more flexible. There are lots of capabilities that we haven't talked about here, but that are things like bridge tables and dimensional concepts that really are built into the product that make it a much stronger enterprise platform, if you will. Data mining, of course, has made great advances in this release, and I think it'll be a part of every significant data warehouse and business intelligence effort. There's a lot of value in the data mining tools. Of course, reporting services has been around in the last since SQL Server 2000 and has had people have had a lot of experience with it, and it's certainly a good enterprise reporting delivery platform. It's definitely programmer oriented. This is not an ad hoc tool, and hopefully nobody believes it is. Right? Especially if you're having people use Report Designer, we're not going to distribute Visual Studio to everyone's desktop. Moving forward, I think ProClarity and Office 2007 are going to be where a lot of Microsoft ad hoc capabilities come from, and there's certainly, of course, there's third-party tools out there that are very powerful ad hoc tool sets, and I think those will be part of many data warehouse and business intelligence systems. Visual Studio, I think, is a really strong development environment. It took me a while to get used to it, but once I did, I really appreciate some of the development power it brings to the process. And I think one of the big things about SQL Server 2005 is the issue of scale. The technology can definitely scale into the multi-terabyte range. There are lots of examples of this today already in place. Anytime you deal with big data, it's going to take more time and effort, and you should just plan on that. But the technology is not going to be the limiting factor in this case. There are some real-time features as well. I'm not going to talk about those because I think they're dangerous, especially if you're starting out. They're valuable, but they can be a distraction from what we've talked about as business value. Take a quick survey here. I'm just curious how much experience folks have had with the SQL Server 2005 platform as a data warehouse and business intelligence platform. So this is good. We see pretty quickly that we're in the early phases of the process. It looks like well above 60% are either in experimentation or sort of earlier. And then if you add in the simple ETL, we're into the 80s. 70, 79, 80%. So that's great. I mean, I really encourage the experimentation. I think the more you play with it, the more you'll be intrigued by its possibilities. This is a related poll, and it's for my information. Really, I'm interested in sort of what's drawing people to SQL Server, or in general, how do you determine what criteria you're using to determine your data warehousing business intelligence platform. And I'm asking this because I have a theory that the single source provider is going to be an appealing benefit to people from a risk reduction point of view and a product integration point of view and things like that. So at some level, this I think is bearing out my my theory. I think the reporting and analysis piece is strong because that's been a strength of reporting services in the past and of Microsoft's platform in the past. So I think that makes sense to me as well. Okay, we can show the poll. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. I didn't realize it was hidden. You can see that single source provider is definitely a leader, and reporting services are very close behind. So that's great. I appreciate your input on that. Let's look briefly at the data track. This is a one-slide overview of dimensional modeling, which takes a day and a half in the lifecycle class and 4 days in the advanced dimensional modeling class. You're not going to get it. Hopefully you'll get the concepts here, but not the skill set. The way we do this, we develop our target data model based on the top priority data area that we identified in the prioritization process. The fact table, which is this sort of, I don't know, chartreuse table down here, is the measurement table. This is where the business events go. So orders would be measured in the fact table. The dimension tables are, as I said before, the objects that participate in the events. So if we have sales or orders, we sell products, we sell them, a retail organization might sell them from a certain store, under a certain promotion, on a certain date. And each of these has attributes that describe it. So the product has attributes about its size and maybe its color and maybe its weight and its description and its product group and things like that. The product tables, we use surrogate keys as the key. We substitute a surrogate key, and we do this for several reasons that I'm not going to elaborate on, just from a timing perspective. But there are lots of good reasons to do it. We have a concept called slowly changing dimensions that allow us to track changes in product attributes or store attributes or promotion attributes over time. And we have two primary methods, type 1, which is where we don't actually track the change, we just overwrite it, and type 2, where we add a new row and we actually track changes over time. One of the important things about building the target data model and in this data track is to make sure that we identify data quality issues now and really get them understood and set expectations about what those are and how we should best deal with them. The sooner we do that, the better. Many projects wait until we get into the ETL phase and start uncovering data problems and end up spending 3 to 5 times longer than they thought they would need to in ETL, because there's a lot of starting and restarting as they uncover these problems. I think integration services, as I said, is a powerful ETL tool. It's got a good feature set. It even has some what I'd call Kimball-based tools that provide for dimensional management. There's actually a slowly changing dimension wizard. And if you look in the documentation, it talks about type 1 and type 2 changes. So we've had some influence, I think, which is a good thing. And certainly, as I said before, Visual Studio, I think, is an effective development environment. At the same time that we're working on the data track, we're also working on the BI applications track. And as I said, we need to focus on the full solution. And part of the solution is delivering business value to the user community. And only 10% or so, if you're lucky, of your user population are going to get in and build queries themselves and get data they need directly. This means that we need to provide applications that are structured, that are flexible, that are accessible. They're sort of in a well-organized framework that allow people to get the information they need without having to learn a tool and to learn the data structures and things like that. So for 90% of the population, we're going to need to build these reports, and they better be good because these are the only way that people are going to see what's in the data warehouse for 90% of the population. So they need to look good, they need to work well, they need to be right. So we need to spend time and energy on these. This is not a side activity. There are basically typically two steps in this process. We do design and specs right after the business requirements are done, and we'll basically create documentation for this. And once we're finished, we put it on the shelf and wait. Typically, it takes 2 months or so before we have some data available and we have our tools installed and we can actually start building reports. When we get to that point, we'll pull out the specs and we'll get to work. And it's a good idea to do this as part of the beta testing process. And I also I like to include users in this process. It gives them early access. It lets them learn the tools. It lets them learn the data. Empower users, right? People I'm really that I want to have a good working relationship with. So we'll have fun with it. I'll get donuts, and we'll put a lab together, and we'll all get in there and start building reports together. It's a good sort of relationship building exercise. So the last part, once the 3 tracks are finished and come together, is deployment, maintenance, and growth. So deployment itself has 2 major components typically. There's a software component, of course, and we're all familiar with that. The idea of moving systems and data from development through tests and out to production. And there are tools in the SQL Server environment to help do this. I think one of the things that I want to emphasize that we often neglect is the other half of the deployment, which is the idea of user preparedness. And these are things like training and documentation and support. We have to have the tools in place and the skills in place to provide this kind of user support, or we risk sort of derailing the effort about 2 minutes before we reach the station, if you will, to keep my metaphor consistent. Once we deploy a set of data like orders, we need to maintain that. We need to monitor its usage. We need to monitor performance. We need to look for problems. We need to make sure we're not running out of disk space, things like that. And we have tools in place to do that. We describe those in the Microsoft Toolkit. We also, and this is why the lifecycle splits up, we need to worry about growth. We need to iterate back through the lifecycle for the next row on the bus matrix, the next set of data, the next increment that we're going to create a model for, do the ETL for, build some applications for, deploy out to the users, and come back around. The idea is we want to identify high-value pieces and deliver them incrementally, right, so that we can get value out to users as quickly as possible. So that's the life cycle in a nutshell, a pretty big nutshell. I'm going to talk briefly about how the Kimball method and SQL Server 2005 align. I've mentioned some of these during the review of the life cycle. Let me just say, first of all, of course, that business value is something that you need to work on. There really aren't tools that help with this very much except spreadsheets and word processing and PowerPoint, right? Office is the tool that helps us work with business value. The DWBI system, certainly I think the core technology stack in SQL Server 2005 does align well, very well with the Kimball method. The analysis services and the relational engine both have sort of a dimensional orientation to them. The integration services has dimensional-based tools built into it. Reporting services is a competent tool for the BI applications layer. Ad hoc. Report Builder, I have to say, I don't think is a real powerful tool, but it is the one that's there today. And then certainly we're going to hear more, I think very soon, I think maybe even today, about ProClarity and how it's going to fit in the product. And Office 2007, I think it's going to be really helpful, and it's already in Beta 2, probably will be out later this year, the beginning of next year. Not that I'm from Microsoft and can announce anything like that, right? all those opinions are strictly my own. And SharePoint has some great portal capabilities. So I think the tool set really lines up with how we think information needs to be gathered, managed, and presented to the user community. And this just lines up the tracks with the tools that you might apply to the tracks themselves, specifically on a tool-by-tool basis. So let me try and summarize. I think the data warehouse system it can be high value. It is high value if we approach it right, and it is definitely high risk. So we can reduce that risk by taking an approach that starts with business requirements, works with business people to prioritize those requirements, builds an information infrastructure around a flexible data architecture, and delivers a full solution, and does that incrementally. Right? We want to get value out to the users, and then continue to build the infrastructure, if you will. I think that SQL Server 2005 provides the full technology stack and sort of allows us to build a viable solution from end to end, and it certainly lines up well with the Kimball method. So some next steps. The next steps I encourage you to do is really about learning. I think one of the things you can do to best serve yourself is to learn about your own organization. There's a lot of information available in most companies on the intranet, or you can go to people in the major business communities, talk to the marketing people and get the marketing strategy, talk to senior management and get the 3-year plan or the 5-year plan or something like that. Really learn about what challenges and opportunities your organization faces, and what's your business environment like, and where are the opportunities. And the more you know about this, the more you can communicate with your business people in their terms and in their terminology, the better off you're going to be. I think it's helpful to learn the Kimball method. On the more information, we have some references to ways to do that. I think it's certainly helpful to learn the toolkit. I think the order of these are important, you guys. Most of us like to start with number 3, learning the toolkit, learning the technology. I encourage you to reverse that. And one of the best ways to do that is to just get started. Do a high-level requirements definition and prioritization session with senior management. Regardless of where you are, you can come back to this point in the process. You may be well in the midst of an implementation, and you can say, we just want to verify where we're at. We just want to make sure that we're focusing on the right issues, and we want to communicate with senior management about what some of the challenges are. So we're going to come back and do this requirements process at the same time that we're continuing with the implementation. Don't scare anyone. And there's no sort of admitting that maybe we should have done this first, right? We're just going to come back and visit these issues. I put a brief one in here because we had one slide in dimensional modeling. I'm just curious if you would attend the webcast on the basis of dimensional modeling. Okay, I think that early election results are in, and I think we have an answer there. Thank you very much. So for more information, you can definitely take a look at these resources, and you can get them. You can download the presentation and get the links directly. We're going to take a few questions right now.
So at this point, Warren, I'll go ahead and jump on in here. So I'd like to let everyone know that if you do have a question, please go ahead and click or type your question into the Q&A panel in the lower right corner of your screen, and then click on the Ask button. We have a number of them coming in, so please get your questions in. We'll answer as many as we can here in just a few moments. I would like to let you know that there are literally hundreds and hundreds of hours of great content out there for you on Microsoft.com/webcast, where you can view all of our previously recorded sessions as well as a list of upcoming webcasts that may be of interest to you. If you have any questions or comments that you'd like to give us on content, if you'd like to tell us what kind of content you'd like us to cover in future webcasts, you can go ahead and follow the URL that we have listed here. I've also posted that URL into the Q&A window for your reference. Also, today's webcast was presented using Microsoft Office Live Meeting. You too can get your own free 14-day trial at Microsoft.com/present live. Now, before I launch the survey, I just wanted to let everyone know that if you complete today's survey, you'll be automatically entered in to win one of 10 creative Zen Ultra MP3 WMA players with a 40 gigabyte capacity. Now, we're giving away 10 of these every month, and this is the last month to participate. So if you fill out that survey, you'll be automatically entered to win one of those devices. So at this point, let me go ahead and launch our survey. The survey takes just a few quick minutes of your time, and we really do appreciate your participation in this. If you like the material and like what we covered today, please let us know. We love hearing your comments and your feedback. So at this point, Warren and Joy, I know that we have a number of questions that are coming in, and at this point I'll hand the floor back over to you to start our Q&A session.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Ryan, I just have one question. Are the presenters entered to win that Zen?
That is a great question. I've never had that question. I think both you and I are disqualified.
Unfair.
It is unfair, but for all of our attendees, it's a great offer.
Yeah, that's excellent. So we have there's several questions out there. Let me just pick a couple out. There's a question on actually where are these headed? I can't trying to navigate the technology.
Well, we can actually go through, and I have Joy on the line with us as well.
Right.
We have, it looks like just about 6 questions in queue. And Joy, did you want me to hand the floor over to you to ask the questions to Warren?
Sure, that would be great.
Okay.
Here's one that I'm answering and will post to all, but where can we go to learn about the Kimball method in more detail? And I just posted a link to our website, but Warren, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
I do want to emphasize, you guys, that we sort of view ourselves as, educators first and foremost, and we have taken a lot of our experience over the years and sort of distilled it down into the toolkit books. So the books themselves are a great resource. Sort of everything we say is in them, and more. And so the link that Joy posted to the Kimball website, I think, is a good place to start. We also offer classes that use the books as the outline, essentially, and we go through them and we can share more experiences and sort of war stories, if you will, in the class, but they basically follow the books as well. So I guess those are the best places I think I would turn to. We're going to be doing some additional webcasts with Microsoft over the next month or so that go into a couple of the components of the Kimball method in more detail, some of the ETL stuff. We're going to talk a little about data mining, things like that. So you can look for those as well.
Here's a good question that I know you'll enjoy answering, Warren. What role does an ODS play in the Kimball approach?
And Joy's making fun of me. The problem I have with the term the ODS is that it actually means a lot of different things. If you sort of look back at the people who've really tried to define it and what they've said, there are at least 4 different definitions for ODS. So ODS, by the way, stands for Operational Data Store. And I think there is a role for it in any architecture. And what I encourage you to do, and when we talk about architecture, is we say start or design your architecture based on business requirements. And there may be business requirements for something like an ODS, which is one definition of it is operational data at a detail level that's probably in the same structure as the source system. So it's a more normalized kind of structure. It's refreshed more often than, say, the 24-hour cycle of a typical analytical data warehouse. And it's used to answer operational kinds of questions. It may involve some integration, so it serves a real purpose, I think, from a business perspective. If we have operational kinds of questions that need detailed data, that need less than 24-hour refresh rates, I think an ODS is a great way to do that. And it separates these more operational kinds of issues from the structures that we use in the warehouse to do longer-term analytic, strategic kinds of reporting and analysis. So I think there's a huge role for it. I wouldn't just do one because it sounds like something I have to have in my architecture. And don't do it because you're supposed to. Do it because it makes sense from a business perspective.
Do we have time for one more question?
Sure.
Okay. There have been a couple questions about front-end tools, reporting and ad hoc tools. So I'll summarize a couple together. What do we do? Currently, we have a number of different technologies. We want to move to a thin client platform in the future. A number of people are interested in going to a single client tool for their business users. What are our recommendations there?
That's an interesting question, and it, the answer, unfortunately, I think is in the future. In other words, I think Microsoft recognized let's call it a lacking in their product line, and I think that's why they bought ProClarity. It's exactly that kind of space that they're looking to fill with ProClarity. I don't know how they're going to integrate it in the product line. I don't know what role it's going to take. I know they're going to be making some announcements. I think even today they're going to talk about their product direction. So that's a if I'm a Microsoft platform kind of person and or organization, and I'm interested in the kind of integration that I can get from a single source provider, that's absolutely where I would start. I would want to see what they're going to do with ProClarity. I would want to see what they're going to do with Office 2007, and I would start thinking about my transition plans now. There are definitely other tools out there that do the ad hoc capabilities particularly well, but if you're looking for lower total cost of ownership, long-term sort of integration with the full product stack, that's part of the point of getting a single source solution, and so I would definitely be exploring those. And I look for some announcements, I think even today.
Yeah, and what I would add to that is even in the next iteration of the Microsoft technology, which I've seen a bit of and really like, it's probably unrealistic to think that you'll have a single client tool that serves both reporting requirements and ad hoc requirements. It's typical to have 2 or even 3. But going beyond 3 to 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, we've seen, but it obviously has its costs. So try to keep it down to 2 or 3.
It's hard to do because, again, this is often more of a political or organizational question. There are people who really like the tool they have, and it's hard to pry it from their hands. And it may not be worth it, frankly. The incremental cost of maintaining and managing 2 tools or 3 tools or something may be absolutely worth it in terms of the relationship benefits that we get. We'll stay on and answer additional questions through the question interface, I guess. But Ryan, I guess at this point we should sign off and make room on the airways for the next presentation. Is that right?
Yes, indeed. So we will continue to answer questions via text mode here. So please feel free to continue to send those in, and we'll keep answering them as long as we can. I do have just a quick little note. A lot of you have responded back noting that the survey is not working at this time. I can confirm that that is the case. We are looking into that now. So please look in your email tomorrow. You'll get a link to this session for the on-demand replay, as well as the URL for the survey that you can go ahead and fill out, and hopefully it will be up and running at that point in time. So we do apologize for the inconvenience. At this point, I really would like to thank you, Warren, for presenting today's material, as well as Joy for our Microsoft Business Intelligence session. At this point, ladies and gentlemen, we will conclude the audio portion of this webcast. You may now disconnect your line, and we look forward to seeing you on the next session. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.